Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Raimy and Bini podcast. Great to have you here. We have a very exciting and interesting conversation to share with you today with Rabbi Tuly Weisz of Israel 365. We'll get to that just after. Please like, subscribe, and share the podcast, and definitely comment. I feel like you'll have a lot of comments on today's conversation. A lot of interesting subjects, a lot of interesting topics were covered, and we look forward to your feedback all the time. Coming very soon will be the newsletter that relates to the podcast and some interesting news coming also about the podcast itself. Raimy, good to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you, Benny.
Good. Let's dive in here before we get to the interview with a little bit of good of the week. Why don't you start?
Okay, so we had I don't even exactly remember how the story started, but my son, who's 11 years old, ended up
Not the rock
going,
climber.
not the rock climber, the other son.
Thank you. That's important.
It's important distinction. My rock climbing son is too busy for this story, so this could only happen to my 11-year-old who's not busy with rock climbing. He got invited by his grandfather, my father-in-law, who is retired and goes once a week to volunteer to this place that packages up food for
Mhm.
people that need the food in our community. And my son has been going for probably a couple months now, and he's the only kid who goes. It happens to be that it's during the last period of school, and my wife and I decided that this was more important. He enjoys it so much. He's actually productive there, and they need his help. Uh, so I think it started over the summer. Maybe that's what happened. And he's been going. So, and he loves it and he talks about it and it's great. My father-in-law recently had some surgery. He's totally
Mhm.
fine, but he's on the DL. He's on the disabled list for a little bit of time. And this group of volunteers, it's mostly retired folks. It's mostly women retired folks that are getting up there in age, and there is some schlepping to be done. Like there's some heavy boxes and whatnot. And my father-in-law, who is not quite at that age, was muscle for them. And in addition to wanting my son to be able to continue on going and having some family adult supervision there, and the fact that they needed a little bit of muscle, which by the way, I don't get asked for my services for muscle very often, I decided to pinch hit. And so it's every Thursday. I'll be going later this afternoon. We're recording here on a Thursday. I'll be going for my fourth time. And it is like awesome. It is so awesome. It's awesome, first of all, to see my son in his elements because he knows where everything is. And I'm
Mhm.
also, I guess, used to other volunteer experiences that are sort of like manufactured for tourists, I would say, where it's like you are
Okay.
absolutely doing something great and it's wonderful. But if you weren't there, the work would probably still get done by another group of tourists or someone else who came in. Like this, the people that are there are like it's hard work. I'm leaving. I'm sweaty. My shirt is dirty and stained. It's like I'm rolling up my sleeves and getting involved. And it's just been awesome. I've heard him talk about this experience for months now, and I just had no idea how fulfilling it would be. And it's like it's become a legit highlight of my week. I'm looking forward to it. That's my good of the week.
Highlight of your week is spending time with your father-in-law. Amazing.
No, with my son,
Oh,
my father-in-law's not there. I mean, he's a trip. It'd be great if he were there too, but my father-in-law's not there, which is why I'm there. I just found out that he's gonna be coming back. He's recovered and he's getting all it's getting the all clear from the doctor in just a couple of weeks. And I'm like, oh man, like I'm gonna have to go back to working during that time instead of
yeah.
volunteering.
You can't write it off anymore. The other people that are there accept you as like a proper replacement for him.
I have such status there because of my son, because he's this 11-year-old kid who knows where everything goes in the kitchen. He's basically running the show. They'll be like, oh, one family needs double this week. He'll be like, yeah, it's family number 11 over there. The bag's in that corner over there. Like he is on top of
Nice.
his stuff, and they love him there so much. So like I walk in and they're like, oh, you're the dad. I am the dad.
I love it. That's a great good of the week. I'm going to share something that harkens back to our conversation from last week about GoFundMe. Because sometimes you have to give, even though I think we did a pretty good analysis slash torture session on GoFundMe's destruction of trust in nonprofits last week. But I want to give them props. It's not them, but it was on their platform. I don't know if you saw this. I'm going to share the screen here with an image. So there's let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Okay. You see it?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a football player, his name is Rico Dowdle, who's had, I mean, in all respects, a very good season. Yeah.
Yes.
He was fined last week for an inappropriate act after scoring a touchdown in the end zone. And instead of just paying the fine, he turned it into a fundraiser on GoFundMe. Now, he's not actually raising money to pay his fine. He can handle the fine. But he jokingly called the fundraiser Support My Fines or the Children's Home Society of North Carolina. And it worked. He obviously paid the fine, but he used GoFundMe as a platform to be able to raise money for a good cause in North Carolina where he plays ball, and got to poke fun at the league, got to poke fun at himself a little bit, and it was really a good thing. So I was just thought it was worth putting up there as a good use of their crowdfunding platform for what I think it's actually for, and in a good way, better than what they had done till now. They should stay in the Rico Dowdle business and not in the other business that we talked about last week. But as much as we took them to task for that last week, we still have to give them props for the work that they do, generally speaking, and for the opportunities that it presents, like that one, which is out of the box and different and weird. We don't have to get into what exactly he did wrong in the end zone. But if you're a Key and Peele fan, it harkens back to a skit from Key and Peele, which I will not link to in the show notes. But yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, so I just thought that was worth sharing as a good of the week in complete opposite end of the spectrum from where you were with good of the week, but a good way to set up and lead into our episode for this week.
Amazing. I love it.
Okay, everyone, enjoy the interview with Rabbi Weisz. See you soon. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Raimy and Bini podcast. There's a lot to get to. There's a lot of news to share about the podcast and the future of the podcast and Raimy's new ventures and things like that. We'll save that for maybe another time. It is my honor to introduce our guest for this week's episode, Rabbi Tuly Weisz, the founder of Israel 365 and someone who Raimy knows longer than I do, but is one of the most influential voices in the Jewish Christian Zionist movement. To have that right? Yeah? Okay.
Who are you asking? Well, yes, I am one of the most influential
Okay,
voices.
there you go.
Correct.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your honesty. The author and editor, I didn't realize this, of over 20 books,
No.
one of them which I have right here. There it is, the Israel Bible. I don't go anywhere without it, except that it's an entire piece of luggage when I travel. Uh, and his latest, I looked it up. You're listed as the editor on a lot of books. There you go. That's the new one, which I was going to mention. The latest work, Universal Zionism, which lays out a fairly bold vision for the growing alliance between Jews and Christians in support of Israel. Rabbi Weisz is a former pulpit rabbi turned entrepreneur, turned faith-based media leader. And the work you do has reached millions and millions and millions of people through digital campaigns, educational initiatives, and philanthropy. And just this month, like in the last week or so, Raymond, I'm not sure you saw this breaking news, they launched, Israel 365 launched an emergency Aliyah campaign following the election of a fairly outspokenly anti-Israel politician in New York, a move that has sparked urgent and widespread conversation, which I think most of the initiatives that you're involved with actually do. So it is great to have you here. Why don't we start with that? Tell us about that initiative right off the bat, because I do think it gets right into the work that you're doing and who you guys are.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. And it's great to be with you, Bini and Raimy, who, like you said, we kind of grew up in the same area of the United States, a big area called the Midwest. And now we're together in the Mideast.
There you go.
Perfect.
We know each other from like NCSY and back in the day. The emergency Aliyah campaign we immediately did because started hearing all this chatter in our family WhatsApp groups and friend WhatsApp groups that people are more nervous than they've been in a long time. People didn't think that the Zohran Mamdani had a chance, but then not only did he have a chance, he actually won in New York City, the city with the largest Jewish community outside of Israel. And clearly, there's a fear that if it could happen in New York, it could happen anywhere, and it probably will start happening in other cities because they figured out a way to, in very blue cities where the Democratic candidate will always win. So the most important election is actually the primary, and that's an election that not a lot of people pay attention to. And so it's very easy to these very well-funded progressive groups like the Socialist Democrats of America to put up candidates in the primaries in you name the city. Pretty much all the big cities in America are very democratic. And so yeah, this could unleash a real tidal wave of similar kind of mayors getting elected. And Aliyah, we, made Aliyah in the good old days where it was very exciting and we were not running from America, we were running to our homeland. And I hope that that is the motivation for people. But at the same time, people are getting nervous and not everybody can afford Aliyah. Number two, it's a very cumbersome and complicated process. Even though Nefesh B'Nefesh is amazing and makes it as easy as possible, it's still very overwhelming for people. And we want to make it easier and we want to help facilitate an emergency aliyah of Jews to Israel in response to the growing anti-Semitism.
Awesome. Okay. Super interesting. Raimy, take it over.
Well, just curious, can you finish that? So what are you doing to facilitate that? Like, what's the plan?
So we work closely, and we'll get into this probably, with Christian groups that are pro-Israel, Christian Zionist groups. So if anybody wants to make Aliyah and is in maybe like our community, well, modern Orthodox, we would say, okay, call Nefesh B'Nefesh, or they've already heard of Nefesh B'Nefesh, or maybe even have opened up an application for Nefesh B'Nefesh. But there's a lot of people who we interact with who are not necessarily members of the Orthodox community or even the affiliated Jewish community, and then they've literally never heard of Nefesh B'Nefesh. And there's a lot of people who are eligible for Aliyah, and I'm talking about Jews who are just maybe a little bit less affiliated, who never really thought about it or heard about it. And we want to encourage everyone to make Aliyah. Israel is the home for all Jews. And so we are putting speakers on the road to go out and talk about Aliyah to people who are unfamiliar with all of the ins and outs. And at the same time, we are working with some Christian Zionist groups that help pay for people's lifts. And we want to raise money to allow more families that want to make Aliyah with the financial assistance that they need. A lot of my friends will tell me that their first encounter with Christian Zionists is, those people helped pay for my lift or something along those lines, which is a very positive first encounter and a beautiful fulfillment, actually, of the Torah's prophecy that it says in the Navi in Yeshayahu that it will be the non-Jews who will help carry us home to the land of Israel.
I didn't know about that lift paying thing. I would have loved to know that in 2014. Okay, now I know. Okay, good to know for future family members or if I want to bring another lift. Is that still viable for a second lift at this point, 11 years in?
I don't know. It's like it's for urgent. Like if it's in your second lift, it's not for like an emergency Costco, shipment. I think that it's not very well known. I guess if you've never heard of it, other people have never heard of it. But there's a wonderful organization called Operation Exodus, and we are now in conversations with them about helping offset some of the costs to allow them to help more Jewish families to make Aliyah.
Okay, so let's step back for a second. You, like I, started in the rabbinate and then left the rabbinate and did this whole new thing altogether. So take me back first, take us back to being a communal leader, where that comes from initially. I think I have an inclination as to where it comes from for you, but take us back into where that drive came to be a communal leader. And then what shifted there for you to move into this particular thing and the genesis of Israel 365.
So I didn't necessarily want to be a community leader, but I grew up in a very special community in Columbus and part of a family that was involved with the Jewish leadership. My grandfather, Rabbi David Stavsky, was the rabbi of Columbus for 50 years. Actually, he was the main rabbinic figure who created much of the Orthodox infrastructure throughout his career that began in Columbus in 1957. So he helped build the school and he helped build the shul and the mikveh and the Eruv and all of the Orthodox infrastructure. Close with my grandfather, I grew up 3 doors down the street and spent a lot of time with him. And my father was very close with him, and my father was very involved with the shul. And so my grandfather had a big impact on my life. I don't know if Raimy, do you remember that shul, Beth Jacob in Columbus?
Absolutely.
Did you know my grandfather?
I'm sure that I encountered him in my youth. I don't remember him being your grandfather, but I remember all the rabbis from those congregations that we spent so much time in.
Right. It's the shul with the stained glass window. That's how a lot of the people from NCSY, because there are other shuls in Columbus and there's other shuls in the area. He actually was one of the founders of Central East NCSY, actually, goes, back in the 50s, he started all of these very innovative at the time. Outreach was something brand new. And that was a big part of his success in the rabbinate. And so he unfortunately passed away, at a relatively young age. And I was finishing rabbinical school. I was finishing smicha at the time. And the shul asked if I would want to come back and, assume the pulpit, you know, of my grandfather. It was a very, very special opportunity for my wife and for myself. And so we moved back to Columbus, and I was very young. I was right out of smicha. And so we were there for a few years in Columbus. And there is when I met actually Christians for the first time in my life. I really didn't have any exposure growing up in the Orthodox community, growing up in the Orthodox bubble. So I didn't have any exposure to Christians or Christianity. And through my work in the community and the Federation, I met these Christians who the Federation system was a little bit dismissive of. These people are not serious. These people have ulterior motives. These people are kind of crazy. And so I never even heard of Christian Zionism. It just sounded like an oxymoron. What do you mean a Christian Zionist? It was so strange but I became curious. And at first I was a little bit skeptical or cynical. And then I said, holy cow, this is incredible. These people are amazing. How come nobody knows about this? And so I kind of jumped all in. And when we decided to make Aliyah, I knew that I wanted to do something to help nurture Christian Zionism, not because I thought it was ever going to expire as quickly as we are seeing it expire. Like this is maybe the biggest opportunity the Jewish people have ever had, and we are totally not paying enough attention. And we need to reach out to show gratitude and appreciation for how much support they already are showing. And if we could get more rabbis involved with this kind of outreach, then who knows, maybe we could actually help grow this. Because at the time, back when I was in Columbus, and it was like 2000 and maybe 2010 or something like that, when I got involved with this in the first place, two Christians United for Israel had just started, and they were claiming that they already had, 10 million members, and then 20 million members, and then 40 million members. And it was growing so rapidly that without the knowledge or participation or involvement of the at least Orthodox community. So I thought, wow, if some of my friends in the Midwest would know about this and maybe would be introduced to their local pastors in the way that I started meeting my local pastors, we could do a lot of good for Israel and the Jewish people.
That's remarkable. I would say to sort of like come back to Operation Exodus. Uh, it's very interesting to me. I've always had a curiosity with, let's say, like corporate partnerships. So this morning I was brushing my daughter's teeth and I noticed that her Colgate toothpaste is Barbie on it, right? Like there's Barbie Colgate toothpaste. And even this morning I was thinking to myself, like, how does the genesis of that partnership start, right? Like those are two massive brands that need to talk to one another and figure out what they're doing and then the marketing and everything that goes on top of it. And it just feels very overwhelming to me. And so thinking about this conversation, sort of bringing it back, like you started all of these local partnerships, but over the course of your career, you've had so many conversations and so many partnerships with celebrities. I mean, people that have platforms of millions of followers, like those are celebrities in their own right. So when you have a big project like this, how are you able to form such strong partnerships with these massive, I don't know what they're called, platforms to be able to move these initiatives forward?
That's an interesting question. No one's ever really asked me a question at least from a Barbie Colgate starting point. But a lot of the early pushback that I got, and I still get, is, well, don't we have so much work that we need to do in the Jewish community, right? Why are you branching out and doing, outreach to non-Jews when there's so many fires in the Jewish community that need to be addressed? So, while that is valid, and I'm not saying that our work is the most important thing in the world, although I actually do believe it is. Not everybody does, and I get that. Um, but no one is doing this kind of outreach, first of all. Very, very few. I shouldn't say no one. There are good people who are doing this kind of outreach, very, very few. Whereas there's a lot of maybe even oversaturation in the Jewish outreach department. If you think from the finances that are involved, and I'll give you an example, like the Kollel in Columbus is a community Kollel, a wonderful institution, and I don't know exactly what their budget is. I don't remember anymore, but they're probably several $100,000, maybe it's a few $1,000,000, and they do really important outreach. But if you break down, well, how cost effective is that outreach? It's very expensive to do that kind of outreach, right? Because there's a lot of competing organizations. Everybody's competing for the same people, and kind of like fishing in the Mediterranean. It's a very crowded coast
Yeah.
along Mediterranean, fishing for the same people, whereas nobody is doing that. Very few people are doing this kind of outreach, and it's the vast blue ocean, and therefore you get a lot more bang for your buck. But the other answer that, or people, then the next question is, okay, fine, I get it. But, we have such important distinctions and differences between Jews and Christians. And it's true, we do. And I don't try to gloss over any of that. I have a lot of respect for Christianity and a lot of respect for Judaism, of course, but we are not the same, and we do not have the same religion, and we do not practice the same religion. There are very significant differences between Jews and Christians. However, it's important to prioritize and recognize that we have much more in common than what separates us. And I think that sort of answers your question, is that when you can acknowledge that we are the only two religions that actually share a scripture, we share the same Bible. That's a big deal to have, an Orthodox Jew who's reading, the Chumash, and to have an evangelical Christian who's reading that same chapter in the book of Genesis. We share a lot of our worldviews based on our biblical worldviews. We share a lot of values. We have a Judeo-Christian civilization that we share that, frankly, right now is under attack. And therefore, we have the shared interest in the preservation of our joint civilization, which is Western civilization. So the need is pretty significant, and especially after this brutal war and the explosion of not only anti-Semitism, but really anti-Western, the attack on the West is something that both Jews and Christians should be very concerned about and very interested in working together, despite the fact that, yes, we do have important differences. What we have in common is much more important than what divides us.
So does that mean, like, I was going to ask you about sort of at the core of the work? The core of the work then is not uniquely or specifically about Zionism in Israel. It's about the Jewish-Christian values relationship. Has it morphed? Did it start in one space and a little bit it's added and grown? Take me inside, like, what are we actually focusing in on the work that you're doing?
So we do a lot of different things, and maybe that's part of our challenge. And in fact, the reason that I connected both with you, Bini and Raimy, is we've done a lot of work with CauseMatch over the years, and
Yeah.
CauseMatch is an incredible platform that I remember actually when Joseph started the company. I don't know how many years ago was that already.
10?
Yeah,
10
just
years
about 10
ago.
years.
We both kind of started around the same time. And so we used to see each other a lot at events for struggling startup founders. And he really, right out of the gate, did such creative, important, and amazing work. I remember him talking about this thing called crowdfunding. And, me and some of the other people here were like, oh, yeah, come on, that's never going to work. That's not a thing. But it's incredible what Cosmatch has turned into. We did start out more in the fundraising space. And are now shifting a little bit more into the advocacy space. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say politics, but education and awareness and advocacy is something that, especially during the war, we pivoted in that direction, kind of away from traditional fundraising for important projects or focusing more just on Jewish Christian relations to more about the urgency of securing a strong Israel and using our relationships and our know-how and our specialty and our expertise into something that is more related to the war effort.
I don't normally hear people say that they moving away from fundraising even while they're getting into other spaces. Don't you need funding to fund the advocacy and education that you're doing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I guess what I meant by that is we have we didn't even start with fundraising, and that to me is not at all the goal of the relationship with Christians. A lot of people, sort of again in the Jewish community, who are a bit more cynical uh, about the importance of outreach to Christians will say, oh, you must be in it for the fundraising, right? In other words, that Christians are a great source of funding for the state of Israel. And I say that's not true at all. If I was interested in fundraising for important projects in Israel, I would definitely focus on the Jewish community because the Jewish community is much more generous and philanthropic when it comes to Israel. For example, during the first couple of weeks of the war, the Jewish community raised over $1 billion for Israeli charities. And according to like kind of my back of the napkin math, the Christian Zionists donated at most $100 million, which even though there's 100 times more of them than there are of Jews, is, you know, not even 10% of what the Jewish community. So the relationship with Christians is, for me, never been about fundraising. They would get our newsletter and they would ask, where can I donate or how could I donate? And they are very generous and they are very philanthropic and they were very interested in blessing Israel. So I had to learn like kind of this new jargon, blessing Israel. But for us, it's no longer really about directing our community towards charity projects. At least that's not the top priority. The top priority is directing Christian Zionists to advocate for Israel in a way that is more politically minded or that is more just lobbying. And there's so much pushback now on Jewish lobbying, on APAC, and on the kind of this dual loyalty charge that the Jewish people have been dealing with for 100 years. But the Christians could pick that up in a way that's very authentic, very America first, but at the same time, and it's even more effective than when the advocacy for Israel comes from the Jewish community.
Is that because of the size and scope of the populations, or that it's simply just it's not the Jews who are asking, so therefore it sits better?
Yeah, both. I mean, again, Kufi, back to Kufi for a minute. I don't know exactly how many members they have now, but I think around 10 million or 12 million, I think. Um, and they are way bigger than APAC, right? APAC has maybe 100,000 members and Kufi has 10 million members. So they're way bigger. President Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, not because of APAC, but because of the Christian evangelical voters who asked and even demanded it. And he honored that promise. And so the support for Israel, Ron Dermer had said pretty famously that Christian support for Israel is the backbone of American support for Israel. It's not from the Jewish community. So, and they really believe it. They believe that America is blessed because of its strong support of Israel. And so that is something that does need nurturing from our side still, or even more so today, now that it's under attack.
Wild.
Curious
Wild.
then, if I could lean in a little bit on two things. They're sort of related. When you started this, you had some pushback, I'm sure, from the Jewish community. I'm sure some of your colleagues said to you, this is not going to work. All right. And now the pushback isn't that anymore because it has worked. You've been at this for a long time and it's been successful. There's pushback from a different strain against the whole idea of Christian Zionism and the evangelical support of Israel. So I'm curious if you could talk about, as a leader in this space and the leader of your and the founder of your organization, how you've experienced those pushbacks and sort of how you continue to move forward in spite of or despite those things that are coming at you.
Well, pushback means that they're noticing you and that they're threatened by you. So pushback is better than no pushback. The first couple of years I had no pushback because nobody even noticed what we were doing. So now that we're getting pushback, it means that we're getting some stuff done. We actually ran a party in the World Zionist Congress, and the actual Congress was just 2 weeks ago. And we introduced 2 resolutions. I think we're the only new party that introduced 2 resolutions, and the resolutions both failed miserably. We got creamed in the World Zionist Congress because there was a lot of pushback that we are secret missionaries, or that we are trying to divert Jewish money to Christian causes, or that we are these messianic right-wing Jews. The one thing that everybody is nervous about is messianic. Nobody wants the Mashiach to come, right? In the Jewish community, there's a lot of pushback up against the messianism is like the worst word to use. So we've been accused by that. That's what they accuse us of, that we're messianic. And I actually think that's funny because we pray every day for the Mashiach. And so the pushback that we're getting means that we're getting noticed, and that our issues are actually a big part of why we even ran in the World Zionist Congress, was in order to mainstream our ideas that Christian Zionism can no longer be on the margins. We need to bring that debate into the mainstream Zionist conversation or the Zionist movement. And while our resolution did not pass, we had over 150 votes in our favor, which in our party has 2 delegates. So that means that there is cross-party support for our ideas. It's not just us. We think that this is important. We have allies and we have work to do. But to me, the pushback means that, okay, maybe we need to pivot a little bit. Maybe we need to talk a little bit differently. I think that we, in retrospect, overreached a little bit in our resolution. And
The resolution.
it was that the World Zionist Congress, which, it's a very complicated system, but they allocate $1 billion a year towards Zionism and Zionist education and advocacy. And we were arguing that in light of the fact that Christian Zionist support is so important today, we need to dedicate resources to that effort. We need to thank our Christian allies for standing with Israel, and we need to establish programs like Birthright for Israel for Christian students, or we need to establish other shlichim to go out and to be emissaries on behalf of Israel, not just in the Jewish day schools or the Jewish synagogues or federations, but into the churches. And the pushback was, oh my gosh, you're going to spend money and all of the diverting resources, and we don't have enough resources for like the transgender bathrooms that we need to establish all over the place. Like literally, that is we lost, and I don't mean to be political here. I don't know the audience here.
About it.
With all due respect to transgender bathrooms, well, actually, I don't have any respect for transgender bathrooms, but the point is that we could talk about that later. I don't know. Sorry. That could be the snippet from the show. LGBTQ plus community got all of their resolutions passed, and our other resolution for sovereignty in Judea and Samaria did not pass. Okay. That shows the major, major disconnect where the Jewish community is today. The Jewish community that just voted for Mamdani in New York, that got this guy elected in New York City, is pushing within the Zionist movement transgender bathrooms and not sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, and not strengthening relationships between Jews and Christians. And, so we have a lot of work to do. And the pushback means that they're nervous. They're scared about us. And they're saying, oh, you're trying to bring Christians in to vote in the World Zionist Congress, which is not true. We're not trying to do that. But they're nervous about, because if that was true, they would be totally, totally outnumbered, and they would be out. And they would lose the sources of their funding, and there'd be no more transgender bathrooms. at Masada and other places like that. They want to, I mean, they want to do the craziest things with the Jewish money, the Jewish resources, this $1 billion, whereas Israel's got real big problems today. And especially when it comes to advocacy for Israel, Hasbara, the support that we're losing. And this is a big part of the problem, but I also think part of the solution.
How surprised were you when you came to the World Zionist Congress and heard this feedback? Was this something that you were anticipating because it was new, because you're a new party, or was this something that you thought, oh, maybe we can gain some momentum?
I was surprised at the level of insincerity coming from the delegates in the World Zionist Congress. The whole system is really fraught with a lot of corruption. Anybody who is following the news, or just Google it, just Google World Zionist Congress, and you will see the amount of insincere corruption. Nobody is there for their idealism anymore. It's all just about getting jobs and getting budgets. And there's a very, very bloated bureaucracy. They're wasting a ton of money that could be put and must be put to better use. And so, for example, in committee, when our Jewish Christian resolution was debated, I was really pleasantly surprised at how much positive support we got from nearly every single party in committee. And everybody said, oh, I'm from Australia and the Christians are our best friend, or I'm from France and I see that the Christians are our best friend. And so there was unanimous moral support for what we were trying to do. Then we negotiated on language. We accepted literally every recommendation, to the point where our initial resolution was watered down so much so that by the end it was basically like, the World Zionist Congress affirms its gratitude to its faith-based supporters around the world, like something very watered down. They took a vote and we lost. After all of these people helped to get more support for us, they all voted against us because they voted in party lines. The left refused to vote for anything that came from a right-wing party, no matter, even though we said that this has nothing to do with politics, it's very political over there. And it really needs like an Elon Musk style Department of Zionist Efficiency, a DOZE, because there should be no one hungry in Israel today with the amount of resources that the Zionist movement has. And we should be developing the whole country, and Kakal is a big part of it. And there's so much good that this organization can accomplish, but not the way that it's currently set up.
And then broadly speaking, when this stuff comes your way as pushback, like it clearly charges you and energizes you. It doesn't deflate you in any way, which is for some that would. So I'm curious, like, is that something you've built over time as like a muscle, or as a leader, or it's like innate to who you are as a human being? Like,
I think it goes back to maybe my grandfather. I do think that he was in my father and my other grandfather. And like I very much fortunate to have had, Baruch Hashem, really solid role models and inspirations for me. And I was always, what my grandfather accomplished, he accomplished the impossible at the time that he was the rabbi in Columbus. So conservative movement, the conservative Judaism was taking over, and they were taking down mechitzas and shuls all over the place. Orthodox shuls their mechitzas were coming down all over the place. And everyone, was eulogizing Orthodox Judaism at the time. And he stepped into the arena and he took a shul that had a rope down the middle, and he built a beautiful shul with a big mechitza at the time. Now it's a small mechitza, and they just raised the mechitza. But he accomplished a tremendous amount on a local level, and changed many people's lives and really helped countless generations of Jews in Columbus. And so I think that I grew up with that very much in my blood and in my world. And it's something that gave me, I guess, the confidence to know that the Jewish people have a lot going for us, but we also have big challenges. And we need people to get involved and to get into the arena and to see a problem, no matter how big and daunting and impossible it might be, but to go out and try to make a small difference. And we've made a small difference at Israel 365. We haven't made a huge impact yet, but God willing, hopefully we will. And we are reaching more and more people every year, and people who are seeing what we're doing. We're not looking to be controversial. We're not looking to, um, you know, we're looking to do what we think is important. And we're not really afraid of the pushback like a lot of rabbis often are. A lot of rabbis, community rabbis, are very nervous about the pushback that they're going to get. They're worried that they're going to lose a member, right? And if you need to rely on every single member in your congregation, I understand, or they've been with you for a generation or two, it's very hard to push back on where your members are. But in the world that I'm in now, so we're in a position to be able to do what we think is important, and hopefully in a respectful way, because we really do understand the sensitivities of the Jewish community and are not looking in any way to minimize the risks that proselytizing presents in the Orthodox community. And so I think we're in a unique position to hopefully have an impact.
I would shrink into a little ball with the pushback. So I appreciate that you have the fortitude and gumption to rise above it and push through.
Tell us about your latest book, because I think that's a good place to. I think it bridges nicely there about the book that just hit the market.
Yeah, Universal Zionism is, the subtitle is The Movement for Israel and the Nations. It was my opportunity to take like all of these ideas that are in my head and try to put them on paper in hopefully a legible way, or even in a persuasive way, to try to make the argument that it's time for the Zionist movement specifically to be more outward focused and to start turning outwards, and in recognition that most Zionists in the world today are actually not Jews. And we believe that God brought us back to Israel, not only in order for the Jewish people to be free from anti Semitism or to run away when the Mamdanis or the Hitlers get elected, and to have a place to run to. But Israel is much more than that. Israel is a place where the Jewish people are meant to thrive and to be like a fish back in water, where we're able to follow the Torah and worship Hashem and serve Hashem in the way that we were originally built and constructed to be a people in a certain homeland. But that's not the goal. The goal, at least to me, isn't a place where we're able to have like more kosher restaurants than you could imagine, or eh, we're meant to be a light unto the nations and to have an impact and a blessing on the entire world. And the entire world is 99.9% not Jewish. And so the book traces the progression from political Zionism, Theodor Herzl and David Ben-Gurion, to the stage of religious Zionism. We talk a lot about Rav Kook and the opposition that he got from basically Satmar, the Hasidic community and the anti-Zionist Torah community, and the religious Zionism movement, which I'm a very proud card-carrying member of. I feel has at the same time started to peter out a little bit. It's not growing in the same way that the anti-Zionist Judaism is growing, both on the left and in the right. The numbers of anti-Zionist Jews is unfortunately growing, and so I believe that religious Zionism needs to reframe and to pivot a little bit more to think beyond our own camp, think outwards, outbound, and to turn Judaism outwards or Zionism outwards and transition into the stage of universal Zionism.
Got it.
The book has a lot of great stories. It's available at universal hyphen
Nice, nice. Well done. We were going to link to it in the show notes and promote it on your behalf. No question about it.
And we're looking to start a conversation. There's a lot in here that's controversial. As you could see, that some of my ideas are more controversial, or we don't say out in good company or in public some of these things. But there is a lot in this book that probably, Bini, you would not agree with, or Raimy, you would not agree with. I would doubt that you're going to agree with everything in the book, and that's kind of the point. I wanted to offer some provocative ideas, and I say that I don't have the monopoly on ideas. This is not the final word. This is the first word, perhaps, in a conversation that needs to happen about prioritizing outreach to non-Jews in the Jewish community, starting really with the Orthodox community, because like I said before, we have so much in common. We have much more in common with our Christian friends than secular Jews, who don't really take the Bible as literally as Orthodox Jews do. And so it has to start in the Orthodox community. It has to start with evangelicals, but that's not where Universal Zionism is going to end. Universal Zionism hopefully will also reach Catholics, and will reach Mormons, and will reach Muslims, and will reach Buddhists. And, that's part of the messianic plan for the Jewish people, is slowly, step by step, that the Geula from Israel, the Zion, will emanate from Zion and go, not just from Jerusalem to Lakewood, and not just from Jerusalem to Teaneck, but also not just to Nashville and to Dallas as well. We're here because we have a big plan, and that's what Universal Zionism tries to outline.
Amazing. Okay.
Awesome.
We are out of time for today, but we have to have you back because at least half of the things we wanted to talk about with you, we didn't get to. And so we'll have to do this another time in the future when you have the time to come back on and talk about some of those things. But Rabbi Weisz, Tuly, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll give you the final word here today with us.
My final word is thank you. Thank you for creating this platform, and for having these conversations that need to happen, and for your important perspective when it comes to fundraising and leadership. These are big ideas that the Jewish community needs to start thinking bigger about, and realizing that we live in such an interconnected world that even if you have a local organization, you could get support for that from people all over the world. Or if you're an Israel-based organization, you could get support for your important work in Israel from not just Jews, but millions and millions, tens of millions of non-Jews. If they knew about what you were working on, would also want to be a part of it, get involved and support your cause. So thank you for the show, and thank you for Cosmatch, and thanks for having me.
Amazing.
Joseph will appreciate that plug right there. Thank you so much. We will link to the new book. We'll link to Israel 365. Like, follow, and support the podcast. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Thanks.